Okay, so we're going to do a little training update on Mr. Hercules. And we've been going about 20 minutes to the right on kind of the largest circle possible on the long reins, just staying at the walk. This time of year is pretty hard on Mr. Hercs. He has a lot of allergies. And today's the 21st. He gets his allergy shots on the 21st every month. So you might see his neck looks a little lumpy, and he's got some pretty good skin irritation down his midline, right where the girth goes. So working on the long reins is how I keep Hercules going if the girth is going to irritate underneath his chest too much, or if he's just kind of itchy and scratchy. And he also happens to have a little bit of a loose shoe right now too. So this exercise is really a go-to for Hercules because he can stay engaged enough to work on a bigger circle without falling forward, unlike Rafalco. And Herc's biggest challenge is sort of untwisting and unbending his midline. He had quite a severe habitual twist that really went all the way through the neck. And so what I'm looking for on the long lines, because he's not a very forward-going horse, that's always been an issue. But the reason he's not a forward-going horse is because he's so kind of twisted that going forward is uncomfortable. So that lengthening of the neck that he just started to play with is my goal in this exercise. There where he shortens the neck or he's a little bent to the outside, that's just him losing his balance and finding stability through a little bit of tightening and shortening the neck muscles. And these last 10 minutes, I start to get more and more strides, kind of the last 10 minutes on each direction. I start to get more and more strides where he chooses to lengthen his neck. So whether he shortens the neck or lengthens the neck, I'm not really affecting it with the long reins. His tail swishing around to me is a really good sign that he's feeling some muscle changes through his whole top line, from the neck through the back into the hindquarters. And so could be flies, but sometimes when he swishes it kind of hard, I think he's just feeling some of those muscular changes in the hindquarters. So he's still, most of the training session is not straight enough, because what lengthens the horse's neck, and then they typically fall into long and low, but what always causes a release of tension through the top line muscles, a release of a shortening type contraction, is internal straightness. So that means the pelvis is laterally stable, is, getting the hind legs under him just barely enough, kind of a minimal degree of engagement. But more importantly, the lateral bending and rotation functions of the spine are stabilizing, starting to create a straight line of force through the midline. And as that straight line of force becomes more stable, straighter, less wiggle, less bend, all horses lengthen the neck as soon as that happens. So getting from that sort of short neck posture and a dropped back or a very crooked horse, I need a minimal amount of hindquarter engagement. This size circle is kind of that minimal amount. But more importantly for Hercules, as he figures out how to just restore the straightness through his spine, all the way through his neck in his case, in those moments like there, whoops, then he got distracted and lost it, but he was just starting to lengthen those neck muscles forward. There, that's better. So the more length I see Hercules choose on the long reins, the more I know that midline is losing the bend, losing the twist, and getting straighter and straighter mechanically. So for Rafalco, I had to focus on the hindquarter engagement. That's more of his challenge, but it's easier for him to be straight. Hercules is kind of the opposite. It's easier for him to engage the hindquarters, but it's a whole lot more challenging to get the straightness. Whew. So I'll give him about 5 more minutes this way. And after, it took about 20 minutes to start to get a more consistent change of posture. That change of posture reflects the change in his internal coordination. It reflects the spine getting more stable, more straight, as well as maintaining kind of a minimal degree of hindquarter engagement. Really, you got to poop right in front of the camera? Of course you do. Okay. So I'm going to adjust my position a little bit, so hopefully we don't walk through that. So as he learns to lengthen those top line muscles, that lengthening that we're seeing him choose through the neck is going all the way through the back muscles, all the way through those gluteal or upper hindquarter muscles. And the key to getting Hercules to choose more forward energy, rather than trying to drive him or spur him or whip him into it, the reason he doesn't choose to go energetically forward is because he's crooked and he's uncomfortable. So the more strides I see with that neck lengthening, and you see as soon as he's distracted, he loses it. He has to really concentrate to make this change of coordination internally that results in a change of posture that we can see externally. But as the more often he lengthens his neck and the more strides that he can hold that longer posture, that lengthened neck, even if he's fallen a little forward on the forehand, he starts to feel more comfortable moving forward. And so little by little, he offers me more energy, but he won't offer me more forward until after that posture is a little easier for him to sustain. Right? He's very quick still to shorten the neck, which is just the level of difficulty he has changing that habitual bend, habitual twist through the spine, also maintaining engagement. So it's been hard for him to physically make these changes, but more and more often in this exercise, I'm seeing him lengthen the neck without stopping. And not only is he not stopping, but the more strides I get with the neck lengthening, the more forward energy starts to come through. And it comes through gradually at first, because he has to learn how to push more without losing his balance. So as long as he's moving, I don't harass him about the speed. I just let him pick his speed. And there's always a dynamic correlation between how many strides on this circle he can keep the neck long versus how many strides he shortens the neck. That has a direct relationship to the speed of his walk, or even playing with maintaining trot, having a more energetic trot than his old shuffly trot. So when it's hot, when he's got his hives, when he's got a loose shoe, this is our go-to exercise. And it seems to be easier for Hercules to change this internal coordination when I'm not riding compared to when I'm riding. So when in doubt, we just go back to the long reins. And it's not a fast process, but it's a permanent change. So giving him time to figure out, and the long reins are resisting the hindquarter and the barrel rolling side to side. That's related to that rotation function. And he really kind of had his barrel rolled left and stuck there, really kind of fixed there. So for his hindquarters and his back to look level as he passes by the camera has been hard earned. It's taken a lot of patience and a lot of repetition. But I know, time to change direction. As he gets more level and more stable, that's what sort of fixes the front end. The front end, the shoulders can become more level, more upright. The neck can lengthen, and the front legs can lighten. So that's the last 10 minutes of 30 minutes to the right, and that's actually his easier direction now. So I sort of start with the right, and then we tackle the left. And depending on how he does going to the left, sometimes I give him an extra 5 or 10 minutes left if he's really struggling. I need my little bit of shade. So to the left, because he's less stable this direction, we see the head and neck a little bent to the outside. And people ask me about that all the time. That outside bend is really reflecting a little bit of instability through the hindquarters. So my job on the long reins is to keep the inside rein straight as a radius for the circle. And if he loses engagement a little bit and his body weight falls forward onto his left front leg, which is his pattern, then I'm going to get slack on my inside rein. So when I use the outside rein to pull the hindquarters towards me a little, if it causes the neck to bend to the outside, then that's kind of where it needs to be for now. And then what we'll see is as the hindquarters stabilize, we'll just do the first 10 minutes on the new direction, which is where we're going to see kind of the biggest problems, worst movement is always on the first 10 minutes of changing direction or the first 10 minutes of working at all, because his habits are right there at the surface. And then by the end of 30 minutes, I'm starting to get more and more of that neck lengthening, at least to the right. So going to the left, we see him shorten that neck right up again. Oh, and then he makes a liar out of me. He tries to lengthen it. That's pretty good. So the sooner in the training session that he starts searching for that long neck and he maintains forward and starts to offer a little bit more energy, it comes sooner and sooner, training session to training session. And that's kind of how you measure the progress when it comes to changing coordination. So it's not outwardly super obvious because we're starting with core muscle strength and skeletal coordination. And as the coordination takes hold, there's still a layer of work where you're just building muscle strength, just like us going to the gym. It's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take a lot of time and repetition. But resulting in this change of posture. This change of posture tells me that he's really owning this improvement to his skeletal coordination. And he's starting to let go of his old habits of movement because he's finding relief by making changes internally to his coordination, right? So he's not having to use so much energy just to move or stabilize his movement. He's starting to flow little by little, trickle by trickle. And so these first 10 minutes, what I'm happy to see is he attempts to lengthen his neck, usually down this side. All the stars align on this side of the circle. He gets straight, he lengthens the neck, and then up near the camera, he starts to shorten the neck again. There, kind of loses his balance, tightens up, loses a little bit of forward. That's just his old habit, which is exactly what we're here to work through. So balance is something that comes and goes, right? And we overshoot the mark, a little too much here, not quite enough over there, and we keep adjusting. So it's interesting as he goes sort of from the flat to the very slight downhill, that's now where his neck is bent to the outside, just a smidge, which means he doesn't trust his hindquarters this direction to stabilize his body coming down the hill. Then he gets to the flat part down here. He finds that change of posture that I'm looking for. And then we repeat the imbalance. Right? Shortens the neck. Head has to go to the outside in order to keep the inside rein straight. Because what we're feeling through the long reins are all the little weight shifts that we can't visibly see, but we can feel through the tension on the reins. So when he makes this rein slack, it tells me his body weight is falling in. When he pulls on this rein pretty hard, it tells me the body weight is falling out. So the support I give him is leveling off the pelvis, which levels off the back, which gives him room to change how he's using the front legs and the neck, because I'm stabilizing the back and hindquarters. That's kind of how this works. And even Hercules, who had one of the most sort of significant twists and bends that I've ever felt, and very, very hard to change. He had a lot of complications that sort of got in the way of changing that easily. But as we hang in there, session by session, even if I can't ride him, come on, we keep working on changing that coordination, right? And when they bite their shoulders like that, all of them do that as the coordination changes and the back and hindquarters become stable. That's how horses control their body weight from overloading the front end. Oop, there's our little clunk. So that little drop of the left front leg tells me the muscle tone is changing a lot now between the upper back, thoracic sling, and through the neck. So at the very same rate that the back and the hindquarter gain stability, the shoulders, neck, and head gain mobility. So it's sort of a slow process of shifting, stabilization of motion from the front end to the hind end. And until the hind end is stable, the front end can never truly release that tension or gain mobility. So he just blew a couple of times and lengthened his neck, and that's awesome. That's a sign that he's feeling the relief of changing rather than just the challenge of changing. Right? And then he just sort of takes he takes his foot off the brake a little bit. There he loses it completely, coming up the hill. It's not even that big of a hill. Right? So the head goes to the outside, and then he straightens it. And the way I know all horses end up straightening the neck, because it's the most comfortable, efficient way to get around a circle. But if the hindquarters get a little unstable, or the back and barrel roll too much, then they can't control their body weight. They fall to the inside shoulder, and that's what gives me so much slack in the rein that when I try to support the hindquarters with the outside rein, it puts the neck to the outside. And when he's got stability through the back and hindquarters, the neck will look straight and the inside rein will have tension. It won't be loose. That's how I know he's corrected the problem farther back or gained the stability he needs through his back and hindquarters. Right? The stickiness, the outside bend, all of this, and you see on his harder direction, he gives me moments of hitting second gear, maybe even first gear, but I get a lot more stopping this direction. So there was a second little shoulder clunk just there where the leg sort of gave out, And I don't know why it happens that way, but as we get some of the weight and concussion alleviated from the front legs, the changes of muscle tone throughout the thoracic sling seem to adjust pretty rapidly. And you get that little funky step, like they tripped or stepped in a hole, but I just call it a shoulder clunk. And it's kind of like a chiropractic adjustment. It means that he's changing the use of that left front leg. He's changing the placement of it. Right? And he gets a little stuck before he goes down the hill. He bites at himself a little, could be flies or could be an increase of circulation to some of those muscles in the thoracic sling. That can also make the horses kind of itchy. Or it's his allergies, because I literally just gave him his shot before we started today. Good. So again, I was getting some nice lengthening through the neck, and then he kind of tossed his head, right? Then he wants to stop and itch. And so that's the first 10 minutes, which is where he's going to be the worst at his balance, the strongest in his old habit. So we work through it, and then hopefully by the end of 30 minutes this way, hopefully the last 10 minutes to the left at least look as good as the last 10 minutes to the right. And that's all we can do session by session. So I'm going to stop the video there, and this is Herc's update.